Welcome back to the Now Morning Show. Thank you for joining us. If you just got here, you're just in time for a conversation with media practitioner, someone who has been here for so long, and by his own admission, he refuses to retire. Gideon Hanoomansingh is here. He joins us, and substantively to speak about the 2012 state visit to India by the Honorable Kamla Persad-Bissessar, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. But I also want to get some other ideas and pieces of conversation from you. So thank you very much for being here, Mr. Hanoomansingh. But I also want to ask, what drives you to continue?
I believe passion. Passion for getting the information out. There are so many issues to deal with now, emerging as the world continues to turn. When I was here so many years ago, there were few issues or fewer issues. Now, from a global perspective, there are so many other things. Sea level rise, climate change, these were issues that were not on the front burner back in the day. Now, when we read the research from the United Nations, from scientists all over the world, and we see what's happening in the Indian Ocean islands and these atolls going under because of sea level rise, we can only think about what's going to happen to our beloved Trinidad and Tobago. How can we stay quiet and not want to be a part of the dissemination of information? So that's what drives it.
With so many issues, to your point, how do you decide this is something that I want to cover, this is something that I want to do more research on, this is something I want to pay more attention to?
Anytime you have an issue that affects human lives, that's what I go after. I was down the islands recently, Gasperi Island, and I was shown a house where the owner of the house is telling me 20 years ago, he was standing on the jetty of this property and water was barely touching his feet. And now, if he had to stay there in that position, he would be in knee-high water. That is indicative of what's happening in that little Gulf of Paria of ours. So when you hear these stories, when you read that coastal communities from South Carolina to New York are collapsing, and the sea levels are rising because of the melting ice caps, and restoration seems so difficult for small island nations, small economies like Trinidad and Tobago. You want to know, you want to investigate, you want to find out, how are we going to deal with this monster that's there waiting to come our way, and it is coming our way. I went recently to Icacos, and I've seen for the past so many years, I've covered issues on the coastline of Icacos where there's an estate, Constance Estate, that's disappearing. Most of it has already gone. 60 years ago, there was a lighthouse there. That is no longer visible because it's under the ocean. There was a road that took you to the back of the coconut estate. That's gone. Now, I went there recently on the 19th of June with a scientist, Dr. Russell Maharaj, and he was making the observation that this place is sinking. Now, that is terrible news. So how do you stay quiet and not want to be someone who wants to investigate more through the assistance of the scientific community to try and first discern what is happening and then look for solutions.
Do you find yourself using your voice or tempted to use your voice versus bringing others to the fore, like the scientists that you just spoke about?
They're the ones with the information. They're the authority on these subjects. So I bring them together to tell the stories, because you cannot get any greater authenticity than using the voices of people, as I used to do long ago. When there was an international issue, not within our reach, but we are seeing these things, I would go to the university, I will talk with Professor Neville Linton, I will talk with Dr. Sahadev Basdeo, and so many other people who were there, including the Tsar of international relations, as we like to call him, who is now at a Canadian university. And I see that he is still drawn upon for information, asking them as authority in subject matters to explain to the public of Trinidad and Tobago what is happening, so that you learn something, you teach your audience some things as well.
And we continue to draw upon your insight as well. Take us to 2012. Set the stage. Even before going to India, what were some of the things that you were considering you had at the forefront of your mind?
Well, remember, and I just presented TTT with a copy of a documentary I had done when Mr. Pandey found his roots in India in 1997 in Uttar Pradesh, a village called Azamgarh. And I have always, after that visit, said, any student of history following ancestral research gets into an emotional tailspin. You get to a village no one knew, no one heard of, not even the subject matter, in this case, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And as you arrive in this very, very remote place, you see 40,000 people waiting to greet this special guest who is coming. And on the side of where the family lived, there's a sugarcane field. Now that created emotions in me, for the simple reason this man, Mr. Pandey, would have spent all his life among sugar workers, representing sugar workers, didn't have a clue where his ancestors came from until Shamshuddin went there with the assistance of his colleagues in India and found the home and found the family. And when I saw the sugarcane field, I thought, how ironic that this man, Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, is coming here, having spent so many years in the industry, the sugar industry, and there is a sugarcane field in the village of his ancestors. Going forward to 2012, when we went to Bihar, to the village of Boxa, and arriving there to see almost 100, if not more than 100,000 people come out to meet this daughter of Bihar, I was moved to emotions and to tears, as she was, and her sister, and all those who formed part of the Trinidad and Tobago delegation. And it tells you, DK, from wherever our ancestors came, there is always that great emotional attachment to the land from whence we have come. And I saw it in Azamgarh, I saw it in Bihar, in Boxa village, with the Prime Minister. And I suspected, because she was a woman, visiting these ancestral soils from whence a grandfather came and migrated so many years ago, there was greater excitement. I heard people calling her Meena Kumari. Nobody talked about Aishwarya Rai, but Meena Kumari for the villagers meant so much because she was a beautiful, very beautiful actress in India. And they likened Kamla Persad-Bissessar to Meena Kumari. So it really goes beyond what you encounter in these visits from an historical perspective.
Do you consider yourself a little more prepared this second time around? You're talking about that emotional tailspin in 1997. Did you, and you said you were emotionally moved as well in 2012. Were you better able to deal with some of the feelings, the emotions that may have formed this onslaught?
I don't think one can ever get settled in those circumstances. What I felt worked in my favor is the fact that I became a part of all of it through my emotions. So in writing the documentary, as you probably will see sometime later on during the visit of Prime Minister Modi, all of that emotion is reflected in what I said, how I said it, the pieces I used to bring this visit to life. And I am told that even now, the Prime Minister will play that video at her home whenever she has guests, and she will make reference to how she felt about it, about the visit, and how what we did as producers reflected on those emotions. So I don't think I could ever be prepared. I am now, with my wife, in the process of researching her ancestors, who we found out that they came from a village called Guragaon in the state of Haryana, which is just outside of Delhi. And we have asked Shamsuddin to try and help with the research. And I think we're getting somewhere. So I can almost imagine how it will be for me and for my wife finding her relatives in India. And at the same time, I'm thinking about finding my roots in Gorakhpur. My grandfather came to Trinidad aboard the Moy of 1893. Unfortunately, information is not readily available at the National Archives as far as that ship is concerned, but we're getting there. And hopefully with technology and this great resurgence on the part of the Indian government to help people in the diaspora find their roots, I think it will be possible in the course of time.
And I want to talk about that a little more, but even before that, answer the person who asks, feeling your emotions and not trying to fight them, would that have been a bit of a spoke in the wheel of getting the footage? Because sometimes looking through a device to capture image can feel a little limiting rather, when you want to take in more of these sites and looking and seeing what is happening. How did you help to navigate that sort of pathway?
Well, you know, I've always operated with the knowledge and the desire to go with what you have in front of you. You're working with a cameraman. Yes, you might be able to ask him to get a shot or two of some subject matter or image. And when you get back into the studio, as we had to do when we covered news items and so on, you work with what you have in front of you. And that's how you get through. You have regrets sometimes that you didn't get this shot or the other shot and so on. But once you have a tape of material. You take that and you work to fulfill your mission. So it's not a difficult task. It sometimes is regrettable that you didn't get all that you wanted, but I've always had the concept that if you have 10 minutes of powerful material, that will tell the story than if you had 10 hours of all kinds of shots that confuse your mind in putting it together.
So in Daughter of Bihar, or the process that led up to that output, what is the most stark memory or the thing that you remember the most and you keep it with you?
When she arrived in the village, and every time I look at the video, even now, I become emotional because I see myself there, not in the position of Kamla Persad-Bissessar's family connection, but my own. So when I saw how they greeted her and how she responded to them, the garland of flowers, the tears were just flowing on both sides, and Prime Minister couldn't restrain herself. As you know, when I saw Mr. Pandey, when Mr. Pandey, as this tiger and lion, as he used to call himself, melted in the presence of history with tears flowing from his eyes. I remember writing in that piece, Prime Ministerial Tears in India. You know, that has remained with me. That image has remained with me. The frivolities of jetting from Delhi to Patna, that's okay. Getting on the helicopter from Patna village to the village of her ancestors, that was all right. But when we got over the village, and I saw this mass of people, including little children, trying to find a little spot to get a vantage position to see this visitor, this woman who is coming. And then we reached to Jaipur, where she was presented the nation's highest award, the Pravasi. And she was greeted by Her Excellency, the President of India, Pratibha Patil, who held her hands like this, pulled them to her chest in reverence, and she said, "Someone great has come." Oh my gosh. Now, how do you write that? How do you write that in a story? Those pictures told the story.
But as a media practitioner who is still practicing his craft, how do you think history will look at it now that we have the Prime Minister of India coming to Trinidad and Tobago to meet Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar?
Well, it is for me, as it should be for every Trinbagonian, very special. It should be for me, as it should be for every Trinbagonian, an honor that we in Trinidad and Tobago, like a little village in India with 1.4 million people, are hosting the world's largest democracy, the leader of the world's largest democracy. And a man who is no stranger to Trinidad and Tobago, albeit he's coming here for the first time as the Prime Minister, but he was here in 2002 as a delegate from India attending the World Hindu Conference. And I had a chat with him. I was introduced to him as this person who is very, very concerned about Hinduism and spreading the culture and the religion. And he said to me, when he went back to India, he was going to release all things that he did from a public standpoint. And he will devote himself to the lives of his people, India. And the rest is history. He's become the Prime Minister of India. And when it happened, I recalled in my mind, I spoke with that man. I had an opportunity to interview that man, and today he is the Prime Minister of India. Coming to Trinidad and Tobago, all over the Indian press this morning, there are articles, and articles that reflect the significance of this trip. I read something this morning. The Indian media hails the visit and Trinidad and Tobago as the cornerstone of India's expansion of democracy. That is a democracy that came in a bundle, a bag, called the Jahaji bundle, 180 years ago, when our ancestors came here. So this is continuity for Narendra Modi, Sri Narendra Modi, the person, and it is establishing greater ties with Trinidad and Tobago from different perspectives as he comes here as the Prime Minister of his republic.
In terms of establishing those greater ties, do you think there will be an uptick, an increase in people trying to find their, I call it ancestral homes? Because you talk about the work that Shamsuddin is doing. Hopefully technology may be something that can help with that. But do you see that increase taking place?
I'm sure it has already started. I remembered after Kamla Persad-Bissessar, Dr. Rambachan, who was foreign minister, and on that trip, he was motivated to find his roots. And in fact, he went and he found his roots in India. Whilst we were there, the then principal of the University of the West Indies, Mr. Sankat, he went in search of his roots and he found his roots. And when he came back, he was like Moses. Moses, who was on that mountain and had an interface with God. That is how Mr. Sankat, Clem Sankat, came back to us where we were, saying to us, "Oh my God, I have found my ancestors." It's very, very important, and I'm sure a lot more people now would be in pursuit of their roots, simply because of the availability of research at different places, so that, you know, it becomes easier.
Take me through that process. How does one begin?
If you have the name of the ship and the year that your ancestors would have come, that's the start. You take that information, you go to the National Archives here. The people there are very, very helpful, and they will help you search the records. They will bring the books in front of you. Sometimes these books seem as though they are there for centuries. And then you go through. And that is also very emotional, because sometimes you are seeing names familiar to you, and they may very well be relatives of your friends who would have come so many years ago. In Cunupia, where I live, I know of a family whose grandmother came from Gorakhpur. So there is a connection between that man and myself, because our grandparents came from Gorakhpur, maybe different villages, but Gorakhpur is a place of interest to us, and a lot more people whose ancestors have come from there. So yes, go after the search, and you will get a lot of assistance. Now, the Indian High Commission may not be the place to go in search of research, but maybe information about how to get to the various places. And the High Commissioner of today is a very energetic man, and he will do everything in his powers to ensure that there is success in terms of that search.
And even visiting NCIC and this space they have, I saw a Bhagavad Gita
Yes.
that would have come from India, and the family who eventually had it donated it to the space so that it wasn't just they who are able to just look at this testament, this artifact, and I'll even call it an artifact of faith, because you're going, you're not sure where it is you're going to, but you're carrying these things with you. How does one, in terms of finding their roots, how does that help with them functioning or operating in Trinidad and Tobago? You spoke about Mr. Sankat coming back almost moving like Moses. How do you think that helps someone finding that space to function in Trinidad and Tobago when they return?
Well, let's look at what happened. You were at Nelson Island. So was I. And we saw the program that was organized by the Indian High Commission and the National Trust. And just being at Nelson Island resonated with me, because I knew that my grandfather was there when he came for processing. And eventually he went to the Jerningham Junction estate, or he settled there. He had been somewhere else before, but he settled in Jerningham Junction. And I'm thinking, hey, my grandfather was here. And I wondered what happened. So what they did is they bonded. Indians had come from different parts of India. Of course, they boarded ships in Calcutta and in Madras. Those were the two ports from which the indentured immigrants came. But they came from different villages. They had different cultural expressions and traditions. So meeting each other in that spot called Nelson Island created something new for them. They were bonding, they were sharing their cultures, they were sharing their traditions. They came with that great sense of adventure. They had that book not only in their possession physically, but they had the contents of that book in their hearts. And that is what made the connection so strong, and the desire to go back into the places where the Ramayana was written. And that is a real place. That is like Christians going to Jerusalem. And being there, you start thinking about Christ and the stories we heard growing up as children in the churches. That is the same kind of reaction. And that book is so sacred and so important and so potent a connection.
And I think that is something that I want us to end on in terms of connection. What do you think would be going through the mind of our Prime Minister that she's able to kind of reciprocate or be host to the Indian Prime Minister Modi?
Well, when she went to India and she met Prime Minister Manmohan Singh at the time, I interviewed her and I asked her, what is going through your mind? And she said, there are so many things I cannot start to tell you, but I feel a sense of belonging. And when she went to Bihar and she found her roots in the presence of 100,000 people, she said, whatever I am is as a result of you. The people of Bihar and her grandfather and her ancestors coming from that village. She said, my DNA is here. I am sure our Prime Minister is this morning a very happy individual, that she extended the invitation to Sri Narendra Modi. He accepted the invitation, not by chance. He was on his way to Brazil, to the BRICS conference, and it was opportune. And I remembered recently when he went to Guyana, people in Trinidad and Tobago were saying, but why did this man scoff Trinidad and Tobago? He went to Guyana just next door. He should have come here. Well, he's here now, and we must embrace him with open arms and open hearts. And I think that's what is going to resonate with our Prime Minister this morning.
I mean, let that breathe, and we thank you for this insight, Mr. Gideon Hanoomansingh, media practitioner, and we look forward to looking at Daughter of Bihar a little later this morning and see if we see that resemblance to Meena Kumari.
Well, you don't have to go to Daughter Bihar. Bihar Ki Beti, it's called. Just look at the Prime Minister and you'll see Meena Kumari.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. We've been speaking with Gideon Hanoomansingh. We continue after this. The Now Morning Show, it returns after this. Stay with us.
I see a Indian girl, a sexy Indian girl. She does make me so happy. When I see her walking the street,